Good morning. I'd like to call this meeting of the EDA to order. Amy, would you, yes. Betty, please read the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members present today include Nate Anderson, Michael Burns, Violet Delkey, Chuck Henderson, Zach Hiring, Pat Kovash, Jeff Schauman, and Deb White.
Thank you. Moving on, I'm going to amend the agenda slightly so that it gives us enough time for everyone that needs to be here to arrive. So what I propose to do is to move item 6 right after item 3. All right, approval of the minutes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. All right, Brandon. Welcome.
Thanks for being here in the rain. Guys bringing an umbrella? Pardon my handouts, they got a little wet. We'll pass it out that way. This one, pass that out that way.
All right.
Did you guys happen to get a copy of my PowerPoint? No? Okay, I thought Deb sent that.
It is on the city council agenda. If not, pull it up from there.
It would be the same one. If not, I can just take you through it. We'll just kind of reiterate what's going on in those slides. So I've kind of got my guide here. If you have questions at the end, go ahead and ask. But everything that's in those handouts will kind of be summarized in my presentation. And if I miss something, don't hesitate to ask, okay? So without further ado, we'll get started. Back in 2014, the Moorhead Area Public Schools entered into a master facilities plan with a firm out of the Twin Cities. And what resulted from that were 3 phases in our plan. Phase 1 was the 2015 bond, which constructed Horizon West and Dorothy Dodds Elementary and completed some small security enhancement projects at all of our elementaries plus our high school. And that took about 3 years to complete. And we just wrapped that up, not this year, but the last year with the high school project. And now there's 3 phases to that plan. And the middle phase, which doesn't really have a phase to it, which we wanted to talk about here today, were some of the goals of that master facilities plan. One was to solve the K-8 capacity or enrollment issue that we had, and that was the 2015 bond. But in between there, in the next 10 years, the district had a goal that we had to eliminate leased property. And all of you in the room here are probably familiar with the Bella Building. And you're probably familiar with the site that we had on 12th Avenue, I believe, where we held our adult basic ed and we held our ALC programming in 2 different buildings. So we did acquire the Globe building a few years ago, and that took, and without really a tax increase, we took the money that we were using to lease the existing facilities of the Bella building in the place in which I'll just call it the Lakes Country Service Co-op building. And we converted that money into what we would consider a lease-to-own type of deal and consolidated 2 programs into one. So that was the strategy behind purchasing the Globe building on 34th, which now houses those 2 programs. And if you've driven by there lately, you've seen not only do they house our ALC and our ABE programming, but they also house our school buses for the time being. That was the Vista, and then we appropriately renamed the Globe building to the Vista Center for Education. So when you drive by there, you'll see that's what's labeled. The district did also in 2017, as part of this facility master's plan, purchase the former Muscatel Super Center, and you'll notice that there's a little bit of construction going on over there right now. And the rationale for that is because in the 2014 facility study, it was deemed that our bus garage wasn't appropriate for the amount of buses we've had, and with that, it was determined that we needed to find a new home, or recommended to find a new home. So as a result of the acquisition of the Muscatel facility in 2017, we are now going to be able to create a hub for all district activities in one location. So we'll have food service in that facility, we'll have property services in that facility, and we'll also have our bus garage in that facility, as well as district office, and I'll explain the whys in a minute. Pat, you know all about the bus garage. So as a result of relocating the district office, because originally the district office wasn't in the plan to be there, but I want to let you know, as a result of, even with Dorothy Dodds coming in or on board to the district, we are still now officially about 150 to 170 seats shy of being at capacity in all 4 elementaries already. So that's quietly kind of snuck up on us as a capacity issue. So rather than go out on this bond and add another 21 to 24 million to build another elementary school, we're going to look to Probesfield to fill that void without having to go to the public for another 21 million or so. So that's why you see the addition of the district office to this facility, okay? So in regards to that, that's why you see all that commotion over there. We're going to use the Probesfield facility to solve the need for a potential 5th elementary without having to go and build one. We're all aware of the Sam's Club acquisition. That's a facility that we acquired here to house some of our high school kids in what we call a career academy. I don't want to confuse it with the Career and Tech Ed Academy of old. It's going to be a career academy with multiple pathways in it to help our students be career and college ready. That facility we felt like we got for a real steal when we were able to acquire it for just under $30 a square foot with the 137,000 square feet that came with it. The purchase price for that was $4.25 million, and if we were to replicate that same facility in a new location with all the site work that's required of it, we could easily be in the 20 millions because of that. So we feel like that was a good acquisition in regards to us moving forward with the Career Academy and the recommendations of the high school facilities task force. And I apologize that you don't have the presentation up, so I'm doing the best that I can. I was told a little of me goes a long way. Is that true? Okay. So phase 2 now is upon us, and we've accomplished all those other parts of the master facilities plan, and anytime we can eliminate lease property with the potential that we can own it and eventually eliminate a payment, we feel like that puts us in a better shape. Acquiring all those facilities we just mentioned will do that over time. And it's amazing how quickly 20 years can come. And so we really think that those facilities will put us in a good shape down the road. Now we're talking about the phase 2 of this master facilities plan, which is the 2019 bond, and the reason that we're here today to talk to you, and that's to address the adequacy and the capacity of the high school facilities. And when we look at that, for the first time since 1972, our district enrollment tipped over 7,000 students, with another larger incoming kindergarten class, which was over 600 on opening day. I believe it was about 608. And so we have tipped that now. And if you look at, I believe, does everybody have this one that has the enrollment graph on there? You'll see that the enrollment graph will show you that for the high school 9-12, we tipped over that building capacity. So if you read that solid blue line that runs across the graph, that represents our high school facilities capacity. And then when you see that graph kind of tips above that we're close to getting beyond the high school capacity. And the other thing to keep in mind is we do have a couple classes of 400 in there. And now we're replacing those with larger classes of the 550s and those sort of things. So we're treading on a new normal. And I will mention that in the bond of 2001, I believe, when Horizon was built and SGR was built, I believe the goal of the district was to have enrollment stabilize at 450 per class. You can see the impact that has had with us on SGR, with the SGR and Horizon construction. Going on to the next phase, this past a year ago, this fall, we assembled a high school facilities task force, and they really examined 3 options. And one option was to build on the existing site. The second option was to build a new high school on a new site. And the third option was to construct 2 high schools, one on the existing site and the other on a different site. So at the end of the day, the committee believed wholeheartedly that they needed to put together a plan that the community could get behind and support in terms of cost. There was a survey that went out, a scientific survey that mimicked the demographic of the last few elections, and it came back that 110 million was supported at about 54%, and 110 million was the total cost of the project, and the impact on an average home was the $200,000 home was $110 at that time. And since that time that we put that plan together, that because of interest rates falling since that time last fall, they've really taken a dip down. That same impact that we studied last fall, I'm happy to say, is around the $93 impact right now. And I think one of the things that's important to understand is on this tax impact sheet right here, you can see the debt structure, but this is the one I want to call to your attention, is this last box down here in the bottom corner. And what's powerful here in this statement is that when you talk about growth, if you go back to the 2015 bond for around the $78 million mark, a $200,000 home was $13 a month. And that bond passed at about 65%. And I just want to bring your attention to the impact on 110. So over the time since 2015 to where we are today, because of the growth in the Moorhead area public schools, you can see that that impact is now $8 a month on 110 million. So it's really, the growth really helps when we talk about bonded debt. So I want to make that a point. Let's see here, which other ones did I hand out to you? So on the back of this page right here, which was the enrollment one, the first of all, you'll see the diagram of the high school and the Career Academy, and this is kind of the very preliminary sketch of that. And there were design drivers in our facilities committee that they wanted to accomplish with this new design. And the big thing here is, at the high school, some of the deficiencies that it has is, number one, is it lacks natural light. There's very few areas in the high school currently where you can access natural light. Those of you that have been in there, whether you were a former student, because I'm assuming all of you are old enough to not be students, whether you were in there as a student, as a community member, or you were just in there taking your son or daughter to a basketball game or whatever, you'll notice that there's very little natural light in that facility. The other thing that's concerning as we move forward, as we talk about safety and security, is that there's over 28 entry points in the high school as it sits right now. And the new goal here would be to reduce those entry points and have one identifiable main entrance, where right now I think the high school lacks that identifiable entrance. I lost my PowerPoint here, so things are just going from bad to worse as it goes. So the other thing is, the other challenge with the high school is, if you haven't been in there and you haven't walked the facility, there is this very distinct multi-level, multi-points of throughout the building, and I think there's about 28 of those as well, where you can point to where there's multiple levels. And the one thing that we want is, we want the building to be accessible. And so in the design of this new facility, the whole area in which the common area is identified, that's on one level now moving forward. It's not on multiple levels, so you don't have to worry about accessibility. Okay, so we address all of those things in the new design, the things that we can't address right now at the current high school site. Let's see here. And up on the top corner is just a site plan, and again, I apologize for no PowerPoint, but is a site plan of what the site will look like. And I'll just give you a little tip that due to some staff input, if you look at right here, right where the entry is, right in this area, you'll see this long area. That's the theater and that's the arts area. And in order to give us a more defined entrance, the theater arts folks and the band and choir people came and talked to us and said, let's flip that to a different, so that's going to run along where the field house is right now. And as soon as we get that new design, we'll pop that in here and you'll see something different. But so in order for that to happen, they have to do some work yet to tweak that. But that's another example of how, working together, you'll find hopefully the right design as we move forward. So you'll see a different entrance as we move forward from even this presentation today. A couple things in the site plan that haven't been identified yet is where the bus drop off and where the bus pickup is going to be. I think we're working with the city engineers on figuring out what's the best way to handle pickup and drop off at the high school, knowing that we want to keep the students who drive from the students who take the bus separate, so we can keep them safe as they cross and enter into the school building. So you can see there, it's there's on the back, you'll see there's a one-story, two-story, and a three-story addition there. The one thing that we want to bring to your attention is how many of you see in that one layout that you see a phase 1 and you see a phase 2 there, and you see a dotted line. And This happened in the conceptual design phase, and I thought this was the greatest thing that could have come out of this plan. Is the big struggle we were having is how do you construct a 390,000 square foot facility without being all that disruptive to the current site that's there. And so what you see is where that phase one and that dotted line is, that is represents about 80 to 85% of the construction, which happens to be north of the existing high school. So at the same time all this construction is going on, it was very important that we could have class at the existing structure. So while all this is going on, we will still be able to have class at the existing structure. So once the phase one construction is complete, we will move the students into the phase one area, tear down the old high school, which was representative in phase two, and then construct that remaining 15%, and yet be able to continue to carry out our mission of education on that existing site. So that I felt was a major breakthrough in terms of figuring out a way that we were going to handle all that construction on the current site. One other point I think that I want to make when I talked earlier is, in being in here reminded me of that. Over, in case we weren't aware, there's a large construction project already going on by the high school, and that, I believe, is the 2021 underpass. And one of the things that the committee talked about when they talked about going through all three options was, in order for us to be respectful of what's going on in terms of what the city is doing and what we're trying to accomplish as well, the committee on the high school facilities task force felt that we wouldn't be a very good partner if we were to also just take off and move to a new site and build that, when we know that the majority of the work that's being done over there is to improve not just access to to complete the north and the south, but we also know that that was there to improve access for our students. And so we felt like if we were to leave that current site, we wouldn't be working well with our city entity to really pull out what the mission of that 2021 underpass is for, and that's to improve not only access but to improve safety for the high school. So we felt like the right thing to do was to put it on that site and to be on and to honor what's already happening. I hope that makes sense in terms of the thought process and the why of it all. Does anybody have any questions so far? Or do we want to save them until the end? Or am I putting you to sleep with your eyes open? I did that a lot when I was teaching, so I wouldn't think it'd be any different today. When we talked about market value already and the impact of market value growth that it has on the impact of your overall bond. On the back of that page, you'll see the impact as it goes down and how it's divided out. And keep in mind a couple legislative changes that have happened this past legislative session. The Border City tax credit, I believe, went from an appropriation to it now being in law. And the Ag to School credit also went from an appropriation to now being in law. And currently that Ag to School credit's at 40%. I believe next year it'll be at 50%. Then they're going to ramp it up to 55%. And 2 years after, I think the maximum it's going to be at is 70%. So if you're an ag individual and you own land, you will have a 70% credit 4 years from now. And I believe that's written in law. And that's the way it's going to be out to 4 years from now. So the big thing there is it's no longer an appropriation. It is in law, which is huge. We talked about the impact. The debt structure here is, I'll just explain that in a little bit. The debt structure that you see that's in red, that's our 2015 bond. the debt structure that you see that's in kind of that black charcoal area, that's existing leases. So we talked earlier about how we acquired those facilities like Vista, and we've done some additions to SGR, so that addition that you see with the new gym and the addition that you saw at Probstfield again with the new gym and 8 classrooms, and the addition that was up at Robert Asp, and our turf and our track work are all in those leases right there. The new lease that you see in yellow is the Sam's Club lease to purchase. And then the green that you see here is the new debt that would be put into place. And then that little line that you see above for those 2 years that's the district buying down the interest. We call that capitalized interest. So we're going to buy that down so we can keep that steady all the way across for the next 25 years. And what our hope is that some of the moves that we make and Moorhead's continued growth, you'll see this graph continue to fall further and further below that 30%. And the one thing that stuck out in my mind from the 2015 bond was that we were just at the 30% tax rate. And again, that's only for the school district, but that's where we were at in 2015 when that passed. And so you can see the goal here from a debt structure standpoint is we wanted to keep that at or below the 30%. So you can see that that's well below the 30%, or not well below, but it is below the 30% as we move forward. And we felt it was important to keep it at that 110 because that's what we were telling folks from the very beginning. Okay, any questions on that? Okay. So if you wanted to hear this presentation again, you're in luck. You can again hear it again tonight. I'll be here. I'm sure many of you will run because of that. We also have the opportunity October 24th at 6 p.m. at Probstfield when we get to talk about the state of the district. You have to reserve a spot through the community ed department. And then on October 10th at the Moorhead Public Library at 7 p.m. we'll be there again to talk this through. A couple things we're doing differently for this type of bond is we want to have people be able to see the high school so they can see the challenges that we have in the building. And there is community high school tours that are scheduled. I'll announce those today. Friday, October 4th at 6 p.m. You're welcome to come out and take a tour. Thursday, October 17th at 7 p.m. and Tuesday, October 29th at 7 p.m. We will be holding facility tours and taking community through on a walkthrough so they can see firsthand, if they haven't been there already, the challenges that come along with the current high school. And with that, I'm standing between you and the rest of the meeting, but I would be happy before I go back out and get soaked to address any questions that you have.
Yes. Nate.
Thanks for being here today. Based on what I saw here, it looks like the new high school plan would be designed to house between 2,200 and 2,400 high school students. It looks like based on current enrollment trends that we'd be at that capacity or projected to be at that capacity in about 4 years.
Yeah,
is that what you're anticipating? And then is there a conversation about what would happen at that time?
What we've done to try to address that is what we haven't seen, or what you haven't seen there, is the capacity that Sam's Club or the former Sam's Club would be able to hold as well. And so we figure with all of the square footage being used there, that could handle up to 500 kids as well. And so we would build it as such, like you said, but we would also have additional capacity in Sam's Club to address that amount that you're talking about. Yep.
Others, yes.
Well, first, I just wanted to comment just how pleased I am to see the numbers and the growth. I have a 2016 Spud, so he's now a senior in college, and I remember he was in the first class of first graders at S.G. Reinertsen.
Okay, yeah.
When it was fields all around there, and they said, oh, it's going to be years before we fill this school, and very quickly it was at capacity, and I think it really shows fits the the model of if you build it, they will come. And we look at where we've had that growth in Moorhead, and it's around our schools. And one of the questions I had is as you're out there talking, have you looked at, particularly with the Career Academy, if you're able to move ahead with these, the impact it will have on workforce development? And, you know, with our growth in Moorhead, one of the challenges is that if we're building, you know, we have high building costs, and part of that is we have a shortage of people in those trades. And so have you looked at just sharing more information about how having something like the Career Academy will help to address that workforce gap that we have and help bring down some of those building costs? It'll really, you know, even help to foster our growth even further.
Yeah, we've had those conversations. Our goal all along was to, and we're still in the planning phases for that as well. I mean, we've got a lot of questions that we've got to answer as well, but I think we're handling it the right way. I think we're moving at it in a pace that's deliberate to address those same concerns, because we want this facility to also help support the needs countywide. And, you know, we've got one school district that has already said they would be committed to it with us. And we just haven't had the time to go in and ask the other two as of yet. But our plan is to, you know, extend that olive branch as well. And also understanding that we want to team up with M-State as well, and they're on board in terms of teaming up with us as well, so we're not duplicating any type of programming. And I think the other thing that bears mentioning is that we feel like when we put this plan out there, this plan also sets Moorhead up for growth into the future, because this Career Academy that Deb, you were mentioning is probably going to be the most expensive in terms of equipment and in terms of actual operational costs. So we really believe that if Moorhead continues to grow east and it continues to grow south, not that it can't grow north, we believe that if Moorhead down the road elects to, or there is a need to construct a second high school, that the location of the Career Academy where it currently sits can serve both north and south. And we've set ourselves up so that we take our most expensive program and only have to replicate it once. So it can serve both as the community continues to expand. So that was another reason that that site was attractive to us. And then when you talk about the 2021 underpass being completed, that just makes the connectivity from the current high school to that site that much easier, plus its proximity to M-State makes all this synergy make sense in the end. So when we looked at that and we talked about where would be the best place that could potentially go, that really kind of rose above everything else, and it rose above for those reasons. So we set ourselves up for continued expansion and continued growth should that happen. So we'd be ready for that. So.
And of that $110 million budget, roughly what's the percentage that's going to the renovation and reconstruction of the high school versus the Career Academy?
We're still working those out because we got to get the programming down. Right now, the Career Academy is taking up a little bit more than we originally thought. Right now, we have every square foot accounted for in that, so that's accounting for a little bit more cost. So now it's just a figuring out of is there a way that we can not replicate within the two buildings to try to get it to fit into that 110. But originally we were hoping that we would have about $9 million for the Career Academy renovation, and then the rest would be the construction of the high school. But again, that's a work in progress as we try to get the programming down.
Yeah, Chuck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for being here. Rainy, stormy, cold day.
Your sweatshirt's a lot drier than mine, though.
Yeah, it wasn't. I wanted to take it off, but it was a little chilly. Just a quick question. When I talked to the constituents and residents in Moorhead, they're kind of wondering why we aren't building a second high school, and I wonder if you could address that. What's the reasoning and what, why?
Well, I think the first thing, first and foremost, was the committee had to look at a plan that the voters could ultimately afford. And with that 110 million coming out of that survey at 54% and support anything above that $110 $110 million amount going literally spiking down, the committee felt it was important that we put a plan out there that would be supported. And ultimately, down the road, if there's a need for a second high school, now you've got one that's been redone on the north side of town, and you're ready to move to the south side. The cost for the third option, which were the two high schools, was $154 million. And if 110 was at 54% based on statistics and based on that analysis, 154 was just too much to chance, because the 154 meant that you had to build a new one, and then you'd have to completely redo something at the existing site anyway. So you were going to be redoing the current high school no matter what you did. And at the end of the day, that 154 million cost just proved too much for them to risk it, because if we didn't get it to pass, then we have to come back a year later and construction costs escalate, and on 110 million at 4%, you're talking a lot of money to get the same project that you are trying to go for.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay.
Actually, this is more of a comment, just long-term, something to get on your radar. So you've probably seen that we're working on our downtown master plan, and I think I would not really be exaggerating if I say we're on the cusp of this renaissance in downtown Moorhead, and we're seeing a big turnaround that, you know, in the past people were moving out, now we see this population growth in the downtown. And one of the issues is that, you know, at a certain point, this school district chose to take out their schools, their elementary schools in the downtown. And I'm just wondering, again, no, don't need an answer, but just to have this on your radar, if we continue to see this growth in population, if the numbers were to back it up, would the school district consider putting an elementary school back in the downtown area?
Well, I don't think anything is you don't want to rule out anything, because, you know, 5 years from now, 10 years from, I mean, when you look back to the bond of 2001, who'd have thought we'd be sitting here and saying that when class sizes were supposed to stabilize at 450, and now we're looking at classes of 550 to 600. I mean, whatever happened in 2001 really is paying dividends today, and there's growing pains with that, but we're trying to take care of that. And if there is something 5 years, 10 years down the line where it requires us to look at how we do things and do things maybe a little differently than what we do today, I think we'd take a look at that. But right now, I mean, my focus, to be honest, is we need to get the high school thing solved and then see where we're at. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think you got to be open-minded to whatever might come. So, yep.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Brandon. Good presentation. Very informative.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, the next agenda item is the citizens addressing the board, and I guess we've got two parties here. So, please identify yourself.
My name is Igor Lenzner. I'm an attorney consultant for South Moorhead Associates, the Jordo family that owns the Brookdale Center in Moorhead. This is Rick Jordo with me. And the reason that we came today was we're working with staff on a exciting potential project that we've got, and we wanted to update the board and let you know where we're at and show you some things. And some of this information you may have, but we wanted to make sure you heard it from us because we think it's a great potential for the city. And We have some plans that, this board's probably small, first I guess I'll show it that way, but I can pass it around. And basically what we're looking at doing with the Brookdale Center, as you know, there is the former Sunmart Shopping Center that's been vacant for in excess of a year now. And that entire project with the bank and the other strip center that's there was redeveloped about 20 years ago by the Jordahl family, by Rick. And that Sunmart ran their 20-year lease and has moved out. And as you know, with the building we were just talking about for the school district, these big boxes become what we've heard referred to as ghost big boxes. I mean, they generally have a very hard time being repurposed. When other big box retailers come in, they have their own format, style. They come in and build something new, even if they're right across the street from a former Walmart or Sam's or something similar. So Rick and the family have been working for in excess of a year. They saw this coming for longer than that to try to release that Sunmart building. And basically who would come as people who wanted it for quasi-industrial type warehouse uses. They weren't finding retailers. That building's about 60,000 square feet. It's a square, as you can see on the plan. The plan shows the dotted line where it exists now. It's very difficult to break that existing building up for multiple users if you don't find a big box user. And so we're sitting with an obsolete building on that site. And it's obsolete not just from a market standpoint, but from the fact that it's basically lived its life in terms of a grocery store, and to reuse it as anything else, it needs significant renovation. And it's partly the shape and size and how it was built out as a grocery store. So Rick has been working with the Holinsky Design Group out of Fargo. It's regional, and I think a lot of you probably know them. They've come up with a plan to demolish just under half of the building, about 25,000 square feet. That would be the portion of the building that faces Highway 75. They would demolish that part and basically move the walls back to make that building 35,000 square feet and more usable in terms of shape. It would also reorient the building to the east so that if you think about this as a gateway shopping center, your traffic's coming into the community off of 94, they turn onto 75 North, and right now they see the side of a grocery store that's built almost up to the highway. What we do here is take that 25,000 square feet off of that east side, reface and reorient the building so that it's facing the traffic that's coming in. And that building the plan right now is to divide it into two spaces. So you're talking, spaces that are closer to that 12 to 18,000 square foot, which is really what we're hearing in the marketplace in terms of what's potentially usable and leasable. Right now, the Jordals are talking to some national retailers, and these are the kind of retailers that would go in that space that would not only be a benefit to the constituency, but also to bring people across the river and into Moorhead to shop. And so that's kind of phase one of the plan, or part one of this redevelopment plan. Part two is dealing with the sea of pavement that's left somewhat from what you get from big boxes. I mean, now when we do zoning, we're much more cognizant of not having these giant areas of tar, right? When we put medians in and landscaping and things like that. And we're more cognizant of the higher density development. And so one of the other things is to try to reuse and renovate and renew that area by reusing some of that sea of pavement. That would involve the construction of a approximately 10,000 square foot shopping center. Right now we're anticipating 4 bays. Again, the focus would be on bringing national retail restaurant type users in there, much like what you see in the Moorhead Holiday Mall across the street. Across the street we've got, the family owns that project as well. You've got Qdoba, you've got Noodles, you've got Starbucks. We would continue with very similar type national tenants that would both be an amenity to the constituency, but also be a draw off the highway and across the river, because that density once you have that, people just start driving towards Moorhead. Let's go eat. We don't even know where we're going. So that center we're anticipating would be of a quality equal to or likely higher than what you see on the Starbucks side of the road. So you not only have the fit and finish of the building, but then you would have the new build out of that shopping center. And I've been doing this for 27 years, and a lot of what I do is to represent communities in the redevelopment and HRAs and EDAs. And it's interesting because we spend a lot of time focusing on industrial development and talking about those jobs and some of those types of things. But what we end up hearing the most from our constituencies is when we bring restaurant and retail to the community for the citizens to actually go to. So I think that's an important part of this project and why we're here asking for your help. And that is because this is a gateway to the community. And once you start tearing down big portions of buildings, it starts to get very expensive. And that's exactly the kind of thing where we're looking for, and when you would come to an economic development agency for a partnership to say, hey, we want to do this, we want to redo this gateway to the community, and we need your assistance. Now, obviously, we've submitted applications to the administration, and they're working through that. And the goal isn't to ask you to make a decision today. It's to just tell you about what we're doing, answer any questions, and keep this moving forward. So we anticipate that with those additional facilities that there should be in excess of 100 new jobs. And so people say, well, those are retail jobs, but each one of those facilities has management as well. And if you've ever stopped in and looked at what some of those managers makes, it's a little bit above what people would expect. But in addition, there is the jobs created by the construction, the engineers, the lawyers, the title companies, the bankers. I mean, this is truly economic development in both the short-term and long-term sense. Now, the reason that we're here is because it's going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to tear part of the building off, shrink up the building, reorient it, deal with utilities in the parking lot, utilities in the building, et cetera. So we are asking that the EDA, after you review the materials, consider participating in this project because we don't think we can do the project that we plan without your help. And this would, it's just kind of a mock-up of the reorienting of the big shopping center building. It may be that it's double doors because we are talking about 2 potential users now. And then the strip center, and I can pass that around if you haven't done that as well. Now, the reason that I came here today in part was because it's September and Rick's already been talking to some national retailers and they've provided letters of intent and interest, and some of them they're working through those. But they need to know that this project would happen as they move forward. And so we're kind of on a tight timeline as, does this project make sense financially? Can we make it work? And so that's why we are here today saying, you know, if you're interested, we need you to be a partner, but we need you to be a partner and we need to go as fast as we can in terms of trying to get something so that we can get in the ground. Obviously, we can build all year now, but the sooner we can get in the ground, the cheaper it is going to be. And so as we wait and get into winter construction, things become more expensive. In the process right now, we've submitted information to the administration, and they're going through that. This week, we have inspections going on in the building and area buildings to try to make sure that we can fit with the tax increment, redevelopment, or renewal and renovation district requirements, because there are some requirements to be met there. So I've let John Shockley, the city attorney, the EDA attorney, know that we're going through that process, and then we would provide that information to you folks as you go through your examinations. And so if you have any questions about this project, we're here to answer them. Obviously, you can't take action, but we'd like to be back in the very near future, maybe next month, with something concrete saying, here's what we would commit to do. We think that this is probably close to $3 million of new value taxable value when we look at that. In terms of real dollars, it'll be significantly more than that, but what we spend is probably $200 a foot, and what the assessor taxes it at is significantly less. But that $3 million anticipates both the new strip center of a quality equal to or superior to what we see across the street, as well as an increase in the per square foot value of the grocery store because of the fit and finish that will be there when it's done. So we do anticipate that that tax value will go up, could be as high as $3 million. And if that's the case, there should be, some ability to provide tax increment assistance to help with the project. In the formal application materials, we provided a breakdown of some of our sources and uses, and we can provide additional information on that as we go forward. But mostly we were excited about the project. We wanted to show you guys. I know when we met with a committee previously that we were talking about the Moorhead Holiday Mall, the east side of the road, and they said, well, what are you doing with the Sunmar? And we said, it's this big monster that we're trying to deal with. And so this is the best plan we've come up with, and we're actually seeing some real interest in terms of when we shrink that building and we can get that space to something that's more usable, and we can cut it down to 15 to 18,000 square feet for tenants. Now we've got some real interest that we're working with commercial brokers on in terms of making that a reality of something that'll work. And so that was part one of why I was here, and part two of why I was here was to bring up the Moorhead Holiday Mall side of the road. When we met last with the committee, we talked about a bunch of ideas to try to make that previous project from 20 years ago cash flow better. And most of those ideas kind of hit a roadblock, but one of those ideas actually shows some real potential. And when we met last, the committee said, if you can work on the Brookdale side, we can pursue the idea of potentially refinancing the bonds that we hold on the Holiday Mall side. So those bonds on the Holiday Mall side currently, what happened was there was a redevelopment project there, and I know many of you, maybe none of you at this table were involved in it. I wasn't either. That project involved both city financing, and the city went out and borrowed money. Those are general obligation bonds, meaning that if the taxes aren't there to pay it, the citizens of the city of Moorhead have to pay those bonds. So they're GO bonds. They're not just tax increment bonds. And in addition to those GO bonds issued by the city or EDA, I'm not sure which one signed off on them, the developer financed part of that project as well and was issued tax increment bonds. Those tax increment bonds get paid after the taxes go towards paying the general obligation bonds. So the city's bonds get paid first, then the developer's bonds get paid. As we all know, the reason that there's been frustration over many years is there were tax law changes that happened right after that project started, or basically right as it was starting. And there isn't sufficient money to pay everyone, okay? And when people undertake a project in anticipation of being reimbursed, and they're not, they start getting frustrated, just like if you do a job and you thought you were going to get $200 for it, and then you get done and you show up and they say, well, there's not $200 to pay you. I imagine most of you would be like, wait a minute, what's going on? So we've been searching and looking for a number of years as to how can we, in partnership, because it really was a public-private partnership that made that project happen, and how can we, with our partner, figure out how to get more of those bonds paid? This is obligations, by the way, that already exist. It's just that there isn't enough money to pay them. And so one of the ways that there can be more money to pay that is to refinance the existing general obligation bonds that the city's issued. The interest rates are at a historic low, as we just heard from the school. Historic opportunity right now to refinance those bonds. Remember, they're general obligation bonds, and so if those bonds are refinanced at a lower interest rate, there's about 10 years left, give or take, okay? Obviously, if you have a lower interest rate and you have the same amount of money, you will pay less money over 10 years. So to refinance those bonds will reduce the obligations of the city and the ultimate risk to the taxpayers because they're general obligation bonds. They will reduce your risk. The bond consultants who have looked at this, we have looked at it. I haven't gotten the numbers from the city's consultant, but our consultant thinks that there's potentially at least $150,000 of savings. That's after cost. So we would ask that you schedule a meeting to address that bond issue, because it's much like a home mortgage refinance. If right now you were sitting on a home mortgage with 10 years left and you were at 7% interest rate, and the banker told you, we can refinance you at 3.5 over the same 10 years. And the cost that it costs to refinance, we can wrap into the refinance and you're still going to save money, right? I mean, we've all done that. I mean, many of us have. I think I've refinanced my mortgage 3 times. And you do the math and you go, well, why wouldn't I do it, right? Because it's money in my pocket rather than some bondholder. And so that's what the situation is here. We have a mortgage, basically, a bond, and we can refinance it at significantly lower interest rates, which would reduce the obligations of the city. And when the city's obligations are reduced, there's more money left in the project to pay other debt of the project. So to me, it's a question of if the bank said you could refinance your mortgage, your payments would be lower, your overall obligation therefore is lower over the next 10 years, why won't you do it? And you say, well, you know, me and my wife are in this house together. And the savings, you know, it was a joint effort when we bought the house, but the savings is going to go to her. Even though it will lower what I owe the bank, it will lower my risk, but the savings will go to her. And if I'm truly in a partnership, I should want to do that, right? I should say, hey, if I can do this, it's no cost to me, it lowers my risk, it's a no-brainer. Why wouldn't I want to? The only reason, I don't know. I can't think of a good reason why I wouldn't. I mean, do I go to her and say, well, what's in it for me? No, I say we're in a partnership. We bought this house together. And that's exactly what I say to this group. We were in a partnership. When I say we, I mean the developer here. This project was done together. There were obligations issued. If the city could do something, the EDA could do something that would lower your risk, no cost to you, that would help make those obligations paid, why not?
Well, thank you for your presentation. Mr. Shockley, you have anything to add?
So I'll just give a brief legal overview if we move forward with the TIF, which is a decision, that's a policy decision, whether you want to give economic incentives. Just to set expectations, there are some timing requirements with granting a TIF. There's reports required on the condition of the buildings to satisfy the but-for test. We have to give notice to different taxing jurisdictions, the school district and the county, and then we have requirements to hold a public hearing, and then we also need an agreement in place. Those are all very routine, done them many times before. If the decision is made to go forward from a policy standpoint, I will execute on that. That isn't, timing-wise, it'd probably be December before everything was wrapped up, just because of the timelines. On the refunding issue, if there's a desire to move forward with refunding the bonds, I believe one is held by the city of Moorhead and one is held by the EDA. That's pretty easy. Just give me direction or the city manager direction and we'd move forward with that. Once again, those are kind of policy decisions. I'm just the attorney. I don't get to make the decision, so I'll hand it over to the person who does get to make decisions, so.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Igor and Rick, for being here today. And your project is pretty fun, so we are really looking at it. And as John said, we're doing all our due diligence step by step. So thanks, John, for the timing idea on that. As far as the bonds, if you recall when I updated EDA months ago about the settlement agreement regarding the Holiday Mall, that was something that was mentioned and allowed in there, but it would be a policy decision, as John mentioned, both at the city level and the EDA level. And if you also recall, what we communicated back to these guys was that we would look at that once a development occurred at Brookdale. Now, having said that, so we're not at that point. This would be premature. However, having said that, the interest rates are it is a good time for the interest rates. It is a lot of work for city staff to do all this, but I'd suggest, because we can't take action today, as I told you guys, I'd suggest that I go look at if we can do that and what the options are and what would be involved to do it earlier than what our original offer was. Bring it back next month to the EDA, see if I can work it out to do it earlier would be my suggestion.
Mr. Chair, Ms. Volkers, I think that if there is staff time involved, that's something we should look at to make sure that we build that into the cost. I don't think that that's an inappropriate thing, and if that, I mean, obviously, we are not looking for it to be an expense of the EDA or the city, so if that is an issue, we should look at trying to build that into the cost, because I think there's enough savings here that makes sense.
Usually with the refunding of bonds, the cost of issuance is included in it. It's really from the bond side, the financial consultant fees, the underwriter fees, bond counsel fees are all included in the cost of the issuance. Perhaps the city manager was referring to the costs involved in the TIF district.
No, I actually was talking about the cost involved for city staff in the preparation and the coordination and all of that. But I do think you're making a reasonable argument, is my point, and maybe we can adjust what we originally said, which was that we would wait, and maybe I bring it back next month if I can figure out how to do that.
I think that would be very much appreciated.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Do you have any questions about the new project, proposed project?
That's exciting.
Would the strip center that you're talking about, the new building, be on the part of the plan to move forward with before the weather gets too cold here, the snow flies, regardless of what ends up happening with the Sunmart building?
Not necessarily, no. We're really looking at that whole thing as a total project because of the fact that we need to know that the Sunmart building is not of that size to not need the parking and to be able to reorient it. So right now, it's a package situation. We haven't even looked at doing one without the other. I don't know if there have been even any discussions of that.
The problem there is there's additional footings for the new front of the new building. And then we start talking about site work. And the new building has got a whole lot of site work to it, where the old building really doesn't have a whole lot of site work to it, because once the building is gone, there isn't much there. But we still have to reload that east-facing wall onto a new set of footings. And of course, we're concerned about pouring concrete. It's not easy when it gets cold. Nobody wants to work when it gets cold, and the cost just goes right up. You could easily probably incur in those costs, well, you wouldn't get your site work done. I mean, then you get the spring where you got load restrictions and you have other issues that go on. So we're really pushing to get going if we can. If we could grade it and get it squared away before it got hard outside, it'd be great, but I don't know. You know, it's tough. But for your information, Nash Finch had a 20-year lease. They vacated the building at 19 years. They kept it, what we call in our business, black. They kept on paying the rent, keeping the lights off, to kill a location for anybody else that might want to move in there with a grocery store. And it's very hard to lease or even start to spend money on a renovation project when you don't know where you're at. And until we got possession, which I think was May 22nd, we really were at square one. So you understand that. It's kind of a nasty way to do business, but they got their reasons.
And then also, what type of commitments from potential tenants for that former Sunmart space? What type of commitment would you have from them before actually moving forward with the rework?
Well, I think right now our focus is on the strip, and we have 3/4 of that either verbally or written letters of intent. So we're well on our way. We have some very, very good prospects for the 35,700 square feet that's remaining in the Nash Finch store, or the former Sunmart store.
I think, to answer your question, I think that project would move forward even without those commitments, because it's basically obsolete as it sits. It's just not leasable as it sits. So this is something that, we have to figure out how to deal with that.
All right.
We have one advantage, though. We have approximately 12 spaces in the existing strip that are fully leased. So we do have there is some flow in the program, and it makes it a little bit easier.
Thank you. Thank you. We have to move on.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other citizens? Yes, Jim.
Thank you. Jim Steen, 601 29th Street North in Moorhead. I'll keep it brief because I know you're running late, and usually you like to be out of here in a few minutes. But I'm here today representing the Historical and Cultural Society of Clay County. And we're running into a few funding issues, or we're trying to resolve some funding issues, basically on some utility costs and things that we're starting to be asked for pay for. Although we financially we are fairly healthy, we're continuing to put on the programs that we put on. But to fulfill the obligation that's being asked of us, we'd have to reduce staff or change hours or something kind of drastic. Right now, just to give you a little overview of our center, it is kind of the showpiece of Moorhead. I mean, it's on our logo and sitting behind the big desk up there. But we get annually on the average of 32,000 visitors a year running through there. Most of our financing or our income comes from membership, admissions, from the gift shop, and from grants, and also from two very charitable, I'll say, contributions from the City of Moorhead and from Clay County. City of Moorhead's is more of an in-kind donation. Clay County actually writes the check. We feel we are a fairly big economic driver for the city. I mean, with recruiting that many people coming through our center and bringing people to Moorhead, we think it's a very good economic development thing for Moorhead. And I know you guys, the reason I wanted to come here today is I know you're going through your preliminary budgets and things. I wanted to put this on the radar for you if you could help us out in any way. I know, sitting on this board myself at one time, you're very good shepherds of the tax dollars that you pull in. I mean, you are a taxing authority. The money that you tax goes directly to decisions you make. You fund other nonprofits like the Moorhead Business Association, the Greater Fargo-Moorhead Economic Development Corporation. You fund West Central Initiative. In saying that, I think we do a pretty good job of our executive director is, I think she's wonderful at, securing grants, although the grants that she gets are probably 90 or 95% project specific. I mean, that can't be used for heat, lights, or anything like that. It's got to be for a project. And she also does a good job of keeping our costs down while keeping these programs moving forward and keeping the people coming to our city. We put on programs like, as you all know, I'm sure you've been to a lot of them, like Oktoberfest and Viking Festival, and the biggest one is that Pangea. We get a lot of people coming through that. So just wanted to put this on your radar. Like I said, I want to keep this short, but as you're going through your budget, and if you think we're worthy, I guess, and I think we are, if you could support us in any way like you do some of the other groups, we would definitely appreciate it. That funding would definitely go to help pay some of the utility costs and things that we incur That's my short and sweet presentation. If you have any questions, I'd try to answer them.
So what kind of, like, how much money are you short?
Well, they're asking for around $50,000. We don't have that in our budget, without a doubt. There's nothing even close to that. So, and I'm not sitting here asking for $50,000. I mean, whatever you could see forth coming to us would be greatly appreciated. But we're working on other sources too. We've been talking to other groups, talking to our members that are very generous. You know, again, you can't go to that well so many times also. But that's, I guess, what they're asking for.
How much is Clay County?
They're over 200,000.
You go ahead.
You say they're asking for $50,000. Can you be more specific?
Well, the owner of the building, which is the city, of course, and that's part of their in-kind donation.
Do you have another question?
Well, I just had a comment. I would be in favor of somehow, I mean, I know we're probably not making a decision today, but I think it, I would be in favor of helping.
Any other comments?
Well, first, I just wanted to say, I think you're right that it is such an important part of our community, and I really appreciate the work that you do in terms of highlighting the different cultures of the folks that live in our community, and it is a real asset. I just was wondering if you're thinking of coming to City Council and talking too.
Well, I think the city is doing, I mean, a great service for us. I mean, that in-kind donation, and actually, so do you, because from what I understand, the EDA actually owns the property. So we're just kind of asking for some help to help support that property and keep what we have going. And in the future, if we can keep it going and keep it growing. And it's, as downtown Moorhead grows, I think we're only going to get bigger and better down there, so.
I'll just add too, it sounds to me like obviously there's the immediate, the budget for the next year, but even clearly there's some long-term issues and maybe having some bigger conversations about,
Well, I think, like I said,
partnerships.
we can sustain ourselves fairly well the way it is.
Yeah.
We're just looking for some help on the basic building,
Yeah.
on the utility side of things, and whatever we can help. I've had discussions with the city manager, and I know she's willing to work with us, and the city is willing to work with us. But we also promised on our side to do everything we can to try to raise some money and to do it on a sustained basis, kind of like you do with some of your other groups, so we know we have this much coming in to help with the building costs.
What are the annual utility costs here?
That I'll have to defer to Ms. Volkers on. Pretty expensive.
It is, I did. So we pay about $80,000, $80,000 a year in utilities, and most of it is for your space. Overall, we contribute in kind for the utilities, the building costs, the coverage for staff, et cetera, to the tune of almost $400,000. That's why, that's kind of why we started the conversations. That amount keeps increasing. We started the conversation, or started contributing more and more back in the late 2000s, so 2008, 2009. HHIC was having some financial problems at that point, so the city stepped in and said, okay, we can help with some of this stuff, and we did a 5-year lease. 10-year lease, 2008, 10-year lease, 5 years plus another option to renew 5 years, so we're at 10 years in 2018. But it was never intended to keep going, and so that's where we find ourselves in a pickle right now. We offered to step in and help when they needed financial help, and now it just keeps increasing because the building costs keep going up, frankly. So, and they are growing, they're adding more staff, they do a great job getting grants, as Jim said, and so we want to be good partners. We just haven't figured out what the long-term solution is to this. I absolutely understand the request to EDA. It feels kind of weird to say, okay, we're going to, EDA would approve maybe, $5,000, $10,000 to go towards it, but then turn it right back to the city because we're paying the utility costs and stuff. So that feels a little weird, but maybe not. I don't know.
Well, and I know one of the things is too, we do take up a fairly decent-sized share of that, the footprint of that building, and this has been some of our discussion too. We as a group, we do not own the ship, we do not own the church. A lot of those utility costs are because of the roof, which they need the roof because of the ship. So that's really not, in my point of view, is not on us. Although we do enjoy the climate control and everything for our other artifacts, but we've tried to break down the percentage of what each people use or each part use, the city uses, what we use, and what's combined space.
That's a good point, Jim. I think you do run and get the revenue on the exhibits, right? Or the tour, or the people coming in to see the ship and so forth. So that's your benefit of it, right?
A lot of it, that's some of it, but a lot of it is the programming that we do.
Yeah. Yep.
Very
Yep.
diverse programming throughout the year, and it's
Which is
always
great.
changed up. And the ship is definitely an attraction,
Right.
without a doubt, and along with the church.
I think
But we do the tours of the church and the ship. We handle that for the city, so.
Exactly. I do think, Councilmember White, your point is well taken, and we are talking, if it's not cash that we get back to offset the 400,000, maybe it is more efficient use of the space, so we can get other tenants in there. I don't know. So those are some of the conversations we're having long-term.
And I have some of the issues with the tenants. It can only be certain kind of tenants because the original loan for the building was from the State Historical Society, and the building, other than where the chamber resides, can really only be used as a museum and an interpretive center as far as the way it's set up right now.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
All right. Let's move on to the commissioners' reports. Yeah, Pat.
I'll be brief here. The Moorhead Business Association would like to thank the staff from the city of Moorhead, Moorhead Parks and Rec, and MPS for their support in our fourth annual Bridge Bash. We had over 1,200 people walk through on the Moorhead side and several hundred on the Fargo side. We had more than 40 businesses that participated and a dozen vendor trucks. It was very well attended. What a great event.
It was.
And I just really think that event really signifies the importance of the collaboration of the Fargo side and the Moorhead side, and that adds benefit to us. And it doesn't matter whether it's the chamber or the diversion or whatever, that really collaboration helps grow both sides. So, great event. We're going to have the Diversity Job Fair September 18th at the Moorhead Center Mall from 10 to 12:30. We have 40 booths and have 4 spaces available. So we've got 36 businesses that are going to come and they're looking for help. The NBA 560 Connect, if you want a beer tonight, it's going to be at Junkyard Brewery. It's going to start at 5 p.m. What a great identity for Moorhead, what those young men have done for us. It just goes to show you that we can support really unique businesses. So, and our MBA Talk Business, we meet every Wednesday at 7 o'clock at the Frying Pan, and then the last Wednesday of the month, we meet at noon at the Speakeasy.
Any others?
No, other than to say, Jim, or Pat, I'm disappointed that the 560 Connect at Junkyard is on a city council night. So
We'll have to talk to them
Right.
about that.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item number 7, the resolution to approve 2020 preliminary EDA budget and tax levy. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we talked last time about the budget proposal. I received a couple questions about it in between, and I just wanted to share the kind of question and answer so you all have the same information. So one of the question was how many and what part-time and full-time employees are included in this budget? And so the answer to that is, so as you know, the EDA does not employ any employees. They're all city employees, but the ones who do economic development are the ones that are being funded out of this budget. So what's listed, I'll list what's in there. There's a part-time 15% office specialist, which you'll see Betty right there. That 15% of her time is being spent on economic development. We've got an intern, 20 hours a week, that we work with the colleges, and we get somebody in there to help with economic development, 20 hours a week. And then there's Amy Thorpe. And if you recall, in 2018, now we're about a year and a half away from this discussion, but we purposely decided to fully fund. She was being partially funded out of the tax authority, and the board decided we're going to do it over a 3-year period, get her salary and benefits fully funded. So we're in year 2 of that 3-year transition, so 2/3 of her salary will be in the tax levy. The other 1/3 is coming from reserves. Next year, you'll see that other remaining 1/3 bump. So that's one of the big increases in this year's budget proposal. The second big increase is use of economic development services of Downtown Moorhead, Inc. That wasn't in there as a budget line item last year, and so that is in there now. Another question was about marketing. So about 2/3 of the marketing budget goes to residential and commercial. It's been in the EDA budget since 2010. The idea, of course, is to make sure that we advertise how great it is to live and work in Moorhead, therefore as an economic driver. So that is in there. About 1/3 is commercial marketing, and in fact, I'm putting some money in the general fund for increased use of commercial marketing for the Economic Development Authority, but we're going to pay for it out of general fund next year, so that's a good thing. Moorhead Business Association, one of the questions was what kind of contract do you have and how much? $10,000, and we very much value our relationship with the Moorhead Business Association, and it's a year-to-year, and that has been in the budget since the inception of MBA in 2009. The last question was, what about West Central? What's the relationship? How much do we contribute? There's a regional economic development partnership with them that's been in there for more than 30 years, $15,000 a year. Then EDA does contribute to the endowment fund and has since 2011 at West Central, and then prior to 11, that was paid for out of the general fund. So those were the questions that I received in regards to the budget. I just want to clarify it. I do have line item detail here, if anybody wants to look at it specifically for the marketing part. So I don't know if anybody wants to see exactly what we paid out of that marketing budget last year. So with that, I'll take if there's any further questions. If not, I am presenting this to you for possible approval so we can set the preliminary tax levy. The council's going to do theirs tonight, I believe, at the council meeting, or they're going to get the presentation tonight.
It's fine.
I do have a couple questions, and I think I might know the answer, but, you know, in 2017 and 2018, you know, there wasn't anything under duplicating and copying and office supplies and postage and printing, and now all of a sudden it's in our budget.
Thank you. Very good question, Violet. Yes, so those two items, there are a few smaller ones like that as you go through them. They were being paid out of the general fund, and that was when we were in transition with Scott Hutchins. He was being charged to between the tax levy and the general fund, and we needed to do some cleanup this year. So we saved money in other places, and then we were able to clean those up and move those to where they are. These are truly economic development expenses.
Okay. And also the professional services, what goes under that?
So that's the one that is ED, or the Downtown Moorhead, Inc. contract.
Okay.
And you'll see in 2019, the reason why it's so high is because we also paid for the downtown plan out of there. Okay, that was a one-time expense. So out of the 150, you've got 100,000 is a Downtown Moorhead, Inc. contract, 100,000 per year for up to 5 years. And then the other 50,000 is, Amy, do you remember? I do have line item detail. It's just miscellaneous professional services. Let me look, though. I do have some detail on that. Okay.
Half of it is greater Fargo Moorhead Economic Development, is that right?
Yes, thank you. That is, you're right, that's 25,000 is for our contribution towards Greater Fargo Moorhead EDC. And then there's some miscellaneous things. Moorhead Business Association is in there for the 10,000. So that's pretty much the whole thing. Then we've got, we did some survey at Macara for another 25,000. That takes care of the whole budget right there.
Yeah, so to that
Sure.
point, if I can ask, your proposed budget then appears to include it in two categories, one being under professional services, and then you have individual line items listed later in the budget for all those items.
So let me see. Amy, excuse, good point, Jeff. Amy, I'm trying to think of what I wonder if we're double counting that, the 25,000 and the 10. They are separate line items, but they were charged this year. I wonder if we are double counting.
We can definitely take a look into that a little bit more. I didn't have any
Of the detail till
of the
today.
detail other than the 100,000 for the contract with DMI.
That is a good question. We should look at that, Jeff. Yeah, I just see that now, yeah.
Yeah, and so the areas I see that might be to look at, that might be duplicated are the 25,000 to Greater Moorhead, and then Moorhead Business Association for 10,000 was previously categorized to professional services. I'm not sure about West Central Initiative, so I defer to
No,
you
that's
guys.
in there. That should be in there. I think you might be right that we've got the 35,000 duplicated. So I'd suggest either we adjust the budget or you leave as is, and that 35 would end up in reserves next year when we don't spend it, because we're only going to pay it once. So however you want to do this.
This require a motion? for-
Yes,
Oh,
it
thank you.
does.
Is there a motion to approve the preliminary budget as presented?
May I ask one more question?
Yeah.
Chris, is this an approval of just the top end of the levy? And then there can be some movement, I believe, within the budget itself, and you can even actually bring the budget lower
That is
prior to
true.
December?
Amy makes a good point. State law says that by September 30th, you need to approve a preliminary budget. That would be the highest tax levy rate. If we do approve it as presented, then we have till December to finalize the budget, and then you would, you can always go down, you cannot go up. So maybe we should look into exactly the professional services history in the meantime. Good, thank you, Amy.
Yeah, thank you. Is there, let's see, is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Yeah, Jeff.
Yeah, if I might, thank you. So I think there's two things. Number one, we need to be cognizant that the tax levy is going from a level of about 440,000 to an approved level of 540. So as to the city manager's point about do we levy for reserves, I don't know that when we're talking about a 20% levy increase, even though these are decisions that have been made in the past to absorb staffing time and so forth. I mean, they're all reasonable, but I don't know that we should necessarily take surplus funds when our current balance in reserves is, I don't see the balance sheet here, but
Two or so,
That,
something.
about $1 million.
So, Mr. Chair, Jeff, so that is a good point, except these expenses are ongoing. Reserves are one-time funds. The reserves, policy of you, the board, has always been, you have those reserves and you use them mostly for development in Moorhead and not for staffing. So we're trying to build in, that's why we did it over a 3-year period. We're trying to build in that into the tax base. Yeah, so that's why we are doing them, frankly, out of reserves, but over a 3-year period to get them built in. So, point well taken.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
Just one more question. I apologize. It's my first budget
No
at EDA,
problem.
so want to make sure we're being prudent. So the marketing budget of $100,000, so I saw the detail of what was spent, say, in 2018. And so my question is, I'm sure the board at each meeting isn't deciding they should advertise in the, whatever, the home buyer's guide and so forth. So who's making those decisions for what equates to 20% of our budget.
Yes, thank you. So what happens is the authority has the authority to approve the annual budget. Within that budget, your economic development director has the authority to make the appropriate purchases and report back, which is what I do, and I am that person, just like I do with the city budget. That's the same authority level that we have at the city budget.
Okay. Any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you. All right, let's see, where are we? Number 8, Amy.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, board members. It's nice to join you at the table. So I asked for this to be added to the agenda for a couple reasons. The biggest reason is because, so we are talking about, I should mention to the public that it's just an update on the Grove redevelopment project, which is located on First Avenue. And this is a project that began well over 10 years ago with much planning and thoughtfulness and frankly, funds from the EDA, which was used for the acquisition of the 2 properties that are now some beautiful apartment buildings. That was Aggregate Industries and Hedgemasters. They were, that site was identified as being like one of the most highly contaminated sites within the city. It would have been identified as a Superfund site, but the state of Minnesota said, like, listen, city, if you step in and help out to redevelop this site, we won't put that sort of federal stamp on your site. And so with the EDA's help and tax levy, we acquired the site and demolished it, presented it back to the private developers in the private market for redevelopment, and then partnered with them to get a grant and for TIF financing. And so we are at the end of that, phase 3 of that project, and we have a TIF note in front of us that we will be having the chair of the EDA and the secretary sign as basically the final step in partnering with this project. And some of the wins that this project has brought forward is, I mean, Junkyard is one of the first probably that, you know, decided where they might be because of that, but then there's been any number of other development projects, apartment projects in and around that development. You know, really want to lift up Mark Buckholz and the Grove apartment project as being one of the first to jump in with the city of Moorhead and really see the potential in downtown. So with that, I just wanted to bring that to you. I know the board, nobody on this board was here. The city manager, I mean, really, literally, I'm the only one. I'm not the one that started it, though. Scott Hutchins, my former predecessor, and Peter Dahl, they were basically in front of that project and brought it forward, and now we are completing it. So sometimes economic development is a really long-term game. So that's it. There's nothing, I'm not asking for anything. Just wanted to lift up a project. We don't often take very much time to thank ourselves or to lift us up.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Amy, I'll say I was on Planning Commission back when this was being discussed, and that was a blighted area, and it was, you know, just thinking about what we could do, it just seems so far away, and it's great when you see the change in that part of Moorhead.
Absolutely.
Thanks for being part of that.
Yep.
All right, economic development, Derek.
If everybody's good with it, I'll just kind of bundle 3 updates all together. We'll just go right into 9, 10, and 10A. So obviously, as always, check out our building and permit information. So there's a link there. A couple highlights just of the economic development report. As of September 1st, there's been 684 survey responses for the downtown plan. It's like unprecedented numbers. We've already hit some records, according to some city staff, of engagement. So it's really exciting. We're just getting into it too, which is just fantastic. We held a couple different pop-up events, but the big one that I hope to see many of you at is this Thursday, the Community Open House, which is Thursday, September 12th from 4:30 to 6:30 at the UMCOMS. We'll have about 6 different stations gathering all sorts of different public engagement. Anything from kind of a unique kind of task where there's about 12 different buckets of different priorities. It could be public art to redevelopment to safer streets, and you have only a few dollars to kind of put your money into what you want to focus on. One thing to keep in mind from EDA's perspective, obviously, as we heard, EDA was a majority funder of the plan. After all this engagement is kind of summarized by our consultants, the plan is to come before this group, probably by November, I would hope, maybe beginning of December, as we enter into phase 2 of the project. And we would be looking for the EDA's blessing to making sure we're on track, making sure we're doing things, added feedback, et cetera. So that's what's to come. And then I know we talked last month about a EDA retreat. We sent out a calendar, kind of doodle poll. We're not getting much luck on getting a whole lot of people at one time, so we're going to kind of reopen that. Amy will be sending out some more dates in November. But consistent theme, I think we looked at it, more than half of the members are new from the last time we did a retreat, which was about 8 months ago, maybe, something like that. So we'll be opening up those, getting some new dates, so check your inboxes here in the next few days, and we'll see if we can line something up for November.
Thanks, Derek. Any questions? Yeah, bye.
Derek, how long is that survey open for?
Well, so this is just the first round of it, so we'll have it open pretty much all through phase 1, which would be leading up into that December point. But then once we kind of tally everything, we start kind of getting some conceptual sum, we'll have a whole nother round of engagement. So more pop-up events, more open houses in January, and probably a different component of a survey out there too, to kind of tailor and really identify some key components of the plan.
I had 2 things from your report. One, as you mentioned, you've got a couple of focus groups coming up, and so I don't know which ones those are, but I know I mentioned before, I think it would be great to do one focus group with residents just in the downtown area, and so if that's not one of them, are they still thinking about doing that?
Yeah, so there's 8 focus groups. Residents was identified as one, but it was really hard to get who those individuals were. So what we're doing is,
I can help you with that.
well, I know you could for sure. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to get a broad stroke of it too, not just like the norm of people that you get either. So we have a sign-in sheet. We're going to have somebody kind of manning the open house on Thursday, trying to get those that are residents of downtown, and then engaging them to see if they want to be participants of a more selective focus group.
And then the other thing, you asked feedback about some of the issues with realtors. And, I just was wondering if you thought about putting together some kind of a gathering with some of our Moorhead business owners that could, talk about the benefits of running a business in Moorhead and, play to our strengths.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I put it in the report. It's we've been doing a good job of going out to the financial institutions. It's paid off a lot. Obviously, we have our economic development incentive index. It's really clean, and thanks to Amy and putting that together. Now we have the toolbox, and I think we can just kind of get out. We haven't set any specific idea of how we get to the realtors. Mm-hmm. There is a focus group for the downtown plan that has a heavy realtor focus or development focus. But the reason I put it on there, and Sherry's still here too, is we went to a business in West Fargo who was looking to come to Moorhead. They're very seriously looking at Moorhead, and when we got there, we found out from a local realtor it was very much turned them off of Moorhead based on the culture that they were describing of Moorhead and some of the experiences. We had since that time had discussions with that realtor, which we were able to explain what we have, what we've been doing. I think the tone has changed, but it turned that business off enough where we lost a potential new business right there. It was actually kind of on the fringe of our downtown, but it validated to Sherry and I that we still have a lot more to do from a reputation and from a perception standpoint. And whether it's the EDA as a group that maybe hosts some type of forum, or the city, however that looks, I think we still can do a much better job of getting out to people what we truly are.
Right, well, and you already answered my other question, which was partnering with MBA on that would be, to me, like, seemed the obvious.
Yeah, we got a good team, don't we, Sherry?
Yeah.
She knows where to find me.
Thank you. Anything else before we adjourn? Well, thanks for the endurance of everyone today. But the meeting's adjourned.